Do y'all remember when grandmama them used to take canned evaporated milk and mix it with some water to feed them babies? And have you ever wondered how or when black women were first introduced to canned milk instead of using their breasts to feed their babies? Well, let me introduce you to the Fultz sisters, who were quadruplets, and their mother was Annie Mae, Cherokee woman fresh out of Tennessee. Listen closely as I take you on the journey of their story.
24 years ago, 4 identical black quadruplets were born around 1 a.m. in the basement of Annie Penn Hospital, and this was on May 23, 1946, in Reidsville, North Carolina. In the basement was the emergency room, the cafeteria, and the rooms for black patients. All of the babies were delivered within 13 minutes by Dr. Fred Clinard and a nurse named Margaret Ware. Their parents were James, Pete, and Annie Mae Troxler Fultz. Their mother was 36 and their father was 54 and a sharecropper. When their mother Annie Mae was 4, she had spinal meningitis and she lost her hearing and her ability to talk. She attended a school for the deaf and the blind in Raleigh, and she communicated through gestures and by reading lips. The hospital didn't have incubators, so the babies were wrapped in blankets and placed close to each other for warmth. Doctors gave them a 50% chance of survival, and Dr. Clinard said that if they lived at least 10 days, they had a chance of having a normal life. During 1939 through 1943, black women gave birth to 7 times more quads, 74% more triplets, and 25% more twins. The Fultz quads were the first black identical quads to survive until adulthood, and very soon they would become little celebrities. Prior to their births, only 6 other sets of identical black quads had been recorded in the United States, but none of them lived past 48 hours. Pete and Annie Mae already had 6 children. They had 4 boys and 2 girls, so you can imagine their surprise when they learned that they were having multiple babies. Before the babies were born, according to x-rays, Annie was only having 3 babies. When their father heard about this, he started pacing back and forth because he had 2 brothers and they had 15 children each. When the babies were born, their father Pete was at home sleeping when his children woke him up to tell him the news. He said, "I never heard of so many babies in all my life," and then he fell back on the bed and fainted. The girls came to be known as the Reidsville quads, the Fultz sisters, or the Fultz quads. I grew up knowing them as the Fultz quads because I have 2 aunts that went to school with them, and their story always fascinated me. I remember seeing them in her yearbook and how pretty they were, and that it was just so neat that they were quadruplets. Dr. Clinard was interesting, to say the least. His practice had separate waiting rooms for blacks and whites well into the 1980s. His very strange son, Fritz, would eventually become part of a deadly duo in North Carolina's 1985 bitter blood case, and I have a video on my channel about it. It didn't take Dr. Clinard long to realize how the babies could benefit him. He began testing his theories about vitamin C on them the day they were born, injecting them each with 50 milligrams. They became his little vitamin C babies. He also experimented on their mother, giving her high doses of vitamin C later in her pregnancy. The names their mother Annie came up with originally were Betty, Clara, Billy, and Ann, but Dr. Clinard took it upon himself to name the girls. He named all of them Mary, followed by the names of the women in his family. There was Anne for his wife, Louise his daughter, Alice his aunt, and Catherine his great aunt. And Annie agreed to the names because it was a different time. Once the babies were healthy enough to be discharged, he set up visitations at their home for strangers to come and gawk at them. They were put on display in a glass-enclosed nursery, and he told the public that visitors were welcome to the home between 2 and 4 p.m. every afternoon. Because the parents couldn't read or write, Dr. Clinard took advantage of them and started looking into the milk industry to find a sponsor for the babies. Dr. Clinard chose Pet Milk, and they negotiated an agreement with Dr. Clinard. And at the time, baby formula companies wanted to use the quads to market to black families since they didn't typically buy formula during the late 40s, usually because of the price. Immediately, the babies were taken off of breast milk and fed their product. And after Dr. Clinard completed the deal, he told the parents. And they were hesitant at first, but accepted the offer because they saw it as an opportunity to make a better life for their family. Now keep in mind, it was Dr. Clinard, not the parents, that signed the contract. For 18 years, the company compensated their parents with 4 sets of identical clothing, medical care, a nurse, food for the girls, a house, and a farm that it turns out nothing would even grow on. The new house had 4 rooms in which 13 to 14 people and a nurse had to live. They finally had electricity, a gas hot plate for cooking, and the front porch was closed off so that the nurse had a place to sleep. Just before the girls turned 1, they were invited to attend a music festival at Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. They were expected to have around 12,000 visitors, and while they were at Bennett, they were awarded a scholarship for their future education. On their 2nd birthday, their father said the 4 girls had made him one of the most famous fathers of modern times, and that they were as happy as pigs in the sunshine and just about as healthy. On October 17, 1949, ads in black publications started appearing that mentioned the girls' excellent health, and Pet also made calendars, posters, and flyers that were seen all over America. They sold more cans in 1950, 4 years after the girls were born, than in their entire 65-year history. Over half a century later, baby formula is a $70 billion industry, and black mothers have the lowest breastfeeding rates in the country. The quad's 5th birthday party was even broadcasted on TV, and they became national icons of the post-war baby boom. The advertising contract had brought in around $350 a month, which was barely enough to keep them off of welfare. And out of that $350, a portion of that had to go to the nurse's salary. So despite their notoriety, their parents still couldn't properly afford to care for 11 children. Plus, they were getting on in years. So in 1952, the girls were legally adopted by their nurse Elma and her husband Charles, who had lost a child to polio. In honor of their Sweet 16, Pet had autographed photos of the girls available for anyone that wanted a copy. Later on in August of that same year, they met President JFK in the White House garden, and later they got to meet Althea Gibson, the tennis player, and boxer Floyd Patterson. In 1965, the girls graduated from high school and they started college at Bethune-Cookman in Daytona Beach, Florida. They formed their own string quartet and they gave several concerts. Mary Louise and Mary Catherine played the violin, Mary Ann played the viola, and Mary Alice played the cello. They dressed alike in high school and they even wore identical prom dresses. They also ordered the same thing at restaurants. But after 2 years at Bethune-Cookman, they were unable to adjust to campus life and they were advised to leave school. So the girls, along with Elma and Charles, then moved to Peekskill, New York. Having to leave school really put the girls in a state of depression. In 2002, Alice was near the end of a long 20-year battle with breast cancer. She lived with it the longest, but all 4 quads would eventually be diagnosed with breast cancer. The first to pass was Louise in 1991 and then Anne in 1995. She was diagnosed the same week that Catherine went in for a mastectomy. And Catherine said, "We all came into this world together. I was the last one born because I was hiding behind Alice's back. Now, one by one, we've died and I'm the last one here." And she would go on to beat breast cancer. But in 2018, she died from cancer in her spine and in her chest. And over the years, researchers and historians have suggested that their daily diet of Pet's formula led to poor health later in life.